Okay, good afternoon, everybody. First of all, I would like to thank LC Brazil for inviting me to give this talk. I know I'm in the last, you guys are on the last stretch. It's, late in the afternoon, so I'm kind of comforted because a lot of the speakers earlier on talked about the safety of sweeteners, so I think that's very paramount, important information. And the last speaker, Dr. Schreiner, get to talk a little bit about Brazilian regulation and also codex. So I will be talking on international regulations, specifically on intense sweeteners. So a little bit of outline here. So what I would like to talk about is what is the function of a Codex Alimentarius Commission in reference to sweetener standards. What are the different functions within the codex that are relevant to sweeteners? So here being the Codex Committee on Food Additives, a very important committee within the codex, and also the Codex Committee on Food Labeling. So in terms of how sweeteners will be labeled and are harmonized in on an international settings. And also, finally, a very important part, and I thank Dr. Ashley talked about it a little bit, the Joint Expert Committee on Food Additives. So these are experts that are, come together and, asked by the different committee, specifically Codex Committee on Food Additive, to come together and assess the risk of sweeteners. So these are international experts that come together and assess the risk of sweeteners and look into specifications for the sweeteners and also in terms of other relevant information on how you analyze sweeteners in foods, etc. So very important function within the Codex Alimentarius Commission. And finally, what is really important with the Codex Alimentarius Commission is the process is a transparent process, and also a lot of the activities from the Codex are published, reports are published, and also the risk assessment are published. So I think that's very relevant and very important because, these are published and a lot of them now are readily accessible online so that anybody can go in there and access the information in terms of how they assess the risk for sweeteners, how they set the standards for sweeteners, and how they will be labeled, etc. So that part, I'll just talk a little bit about the process. Finally, I'll talk about, I think this has already been discussed, but which of the sweeteners really under the Codex Alimentarius Commission, which ones are approved and are in the list and have standards. Okay, so you have different agencies here. Anvisa here, we have one person from Anvisa right there. You have Health Canada, we have somebody from Canada here. Chinese food FDA, and here are the Food Safety Standard Authority of India, and EFSA, European Food Safety Authority. So you have experts in these countries. They have the resources to evaluate sweeteners. They have the mechanism and to write the regulation and is able to do that. But when you think about it, I just search Google on the internet, and how many countries are there in the world? So about 193 to 196. So there's a number of countries in the world, and they don't have the resources, they don't have the technical capability. So I think that's where you have Codex Alimentarius, where it comes. So there are member countries, about 187 or so member countries. You have international agencies. You have your international government organization, NGOs, all coming together in a consensus fashion, developing standards. It is, as mentioned, is a complicated process, sometimes a long process, but I think is a very effective process in terms of adopting standards, at least the minimum standards where countries can agree, and therefore at the end result is to protect the consumers, the public. And the second very important, second other part of important process is you have a fair trade among countries. So you don't want to have, countries that may not have, the resources to look into, evaluate this, different additives, whatever foods that comes to their country. But if there is a standard that they require, at least a codex standard, minimum standard, then there's protecting the public, and also in terms of exporting between different countries. So there is an agreement so that at least they couldn't refer to the codex standard. So there is a fair trade among different countries. So a little bit of codex. I apologize for some of you who may be active in the codex, but I'll try to go a little bit. Codex Alimentarius is a collection of internationally recognized standards, guidelines, and codes of practice recommendation related to food, food production, food safety, adopted by Codex Alimentarius Commission. So this in 1963, under the Food and Agriculture Organization (FAO) and the WHO Health Organization, they established a joint standard program and statutes for the Codex Alimentarius, with the purpose of protecting the health and consumer, and also ensuring fair practice in food. So again, like here, you can see 186 Codex members, 187 of them member countries and different organizations, and etc. So under this Codex member, it covers 99% of the world population. So I think it covers a lot of population around the world. Okay, while Codex standard is a recommendation for voluntary application by members, it serves in many cases as a basis for national legislation by member countries. So countries that, they could adopt the Codex standards in their countries where they don't have the resources. So it would be at least a starting point to write the regulation and standards in countries that may not have like their, where, the expertise or the regulatory process that you have, for example, the FDA or Anvisa or European Union or etc. The Codex Food Safety Standard referenced also by the World Trade Organization agreements of the sanitary and phytosanitary measures. So this has very far-reaching implications for resolving trade disputes. So, for example, if a WTO member wishes to apply stricter food safety measures than those set by Codex, then that member may be required to justify why they are using the strict measures. So that is another important aspect in terms of trade disputes and etc. The Commission promotes food standard work undertaken by international government and non-government organizations as well. So this is kind of a big picture or the chart organization. The Codex Alimentarius Commission, you have the executive body and the secretariat. And then you have the general subject committees, the commodity committees. There's some ad hoc task force. Some of them may have been active at one point. For example, the Biotechnology Committee is already dissolved. There are regional coordinating committees and etc. So since we're here on the low-calorie sweeteners international regulation, I believe the food additive, Codex Committee on Food Additive is very important here, food labeling. And of course, there are other committees that are relevant, contaminants and etc. Because when you set standards for, food additives, you also have contaminants, heavy metals, etc., that you have to set standards and limits. So, this gives a little bit of a big picture. So the Codex Committee on Food Additives, so what is the function really here? What do they do? So they establish or endorse permitted maximum levels for individual sweeteners. So that they establish that, and then they prepare a priority list of intense sweetener for risk assessment by joint expert committee of food additives. So it is a process, where, for example, if you would like to have it reviewed, your sweetener, it goes through your country delegation. They, you put it through the Codex Committee of Food Additive. It's prioritized for it, risk assessment to be conducted by JECFA. Also, is here where it's where it's adopted as a functional class for individual sweeteners. Some sweeteners are their functional class is sweeteners. Other parts will be they could be as flavor enhancers. They also, again, like I mentioned here, the identity and purity of intent sweetener for adoption by the Commission. They looked into methods of analysis for determination of sweeteners in food. And also they consider standards for code-related subjects such as labeling and etc. So the Codex Committee on Food Additives is held once a year in China, and then of course it's a long preparation before that meeting. You have working groups, etc. So non-government organizations and international government organization, and also a lot of regulatory agencies participate with industry input, etc. So the FDA would be the one representing, for example, in Codex Committee on Food Additives, or sometimes USDA folks may go. So different regulatory bodies participate, and I think it's also interesting that also this is where you have the industry coming together, also consumer groups, whatever they have, concerned, where they bring input, and also academics also involved. And so, especially in some other countries where they tap the people that attend for Codex Committee Food Additives, they tap them from universities and so on. They bring their expertise during this process. Okay, so I mentioned, everything is a transparent process, and this is just a snapshot of the Codex Alimentarius, website. This is the different committees. For example, most recent one, Codex Committee on Food Additives. It just took, last week. It completed March 24th. Over there is agendas already in different languages. But again, after the meeting, actual reports or whatever that transpired during the meeting, this was populated so that anybody can have access to those reports. One thing is that's also important is about Codex Alimentarius is that they have the Codex General Standard for Food Additives, which set forth condition under which which set permitted intensive may be used in foods where they have previously been standardized, whether they have been standardized by Codex. So the Codex Alimentarius Commission maintains a database of standards for a lot of food additives, but also sweeteners. So this database is easily searchable. By food additives, names, synonyms, ANIS numbers, etc., so that anybody can go there in terms of which, for example, sweeteners are approved, what kind of information, the maximum level is allowed for the sweeteners, etc. So for anybody can access that information. So I just, so this is, again, the database where you can search it online. And I just, did an example, looked for aspartame under sweeteners, for example. You have the synonym names, and then, what functional classes is approved under Codex Alimentarius. And then you have the provisions for the different, so the number of food categories, about 14 food categories, I believe. So you have, for example, the authorized alcoholic beverages, what level, maximum levels, and then some notes that are also included. So again, this is very helpful in terms of accessing this information. A little bit about the working of the Joint Expert Committee on Food Additives. I think I've mentioned here again. They basically this JECFA elaborates principles for evaluating intense sweetener safety and for qualifying their risks. They conduct toxicological evaluation and establish ADIs, acceptable daily intake. A lot of discussion earlier about ADIs and what is the tolerable intakes for chronic exposure, guidances for acute exposures. They also assess quality applicable analytical methods, what kind of analytical methods you can use to quantify and qualify, qualitative analysis for the different intense sweeteners. They prepare specification and purities for the sweeteners, assess dietary exposures populations to intense sweeteners, and then eventually. So at this point, JECFA, of course, is not only that they evaluate intense sweeteners, they evaluate flavors and enzymes and so many other additives in food. So they have evaluated thousands of them, and they have a very long history of doing this since 1956. They're up to date in terms of the evaluation method for sweeteners and so on. They meet twice per year in